So today we've got this Mercedes E220 in for an A service and a visual health check. To start with, there's a few things we're going to check inside the car. We're going to turn the ignition on, check the dashboard for any warning lights which may indicate a fault. It is currently coming up with an active bonnet malfunction, so we will investigate that. We are going to check the wipers and washers, the handbrake for excessive travel, and also, whilst we're in here, we're going to get the service data from the instrument cluster and then reset the service light. So we're going to get the service data from the instrument cluster and we're going to reset the service light. So turn the ignition to position 1, clear any warning lights that come up so that you're back on the mileage. Press and hold the answer the phone button, and then shortly afterwards, press and hold the OK button. Hold it for a few seconds. That will take us into the service menu. Go down to Assist Plus and press OK, and then press OK for the service data. So this will show the remaining time and the remaining distance until the next service is due. As we can see, this car does quite a lot of mileage, so there's 150 days remaining, but only 200 miles remaining until the next service. So we'll make a note of that. We'll then come out of that one, go into full service and go down to confirm service. Choose the oil grade, which in this case is going to be 229.51. Has the service been carried out? Yes. Confirm. Full service completed. And then you just go back into service data and double check that it's gone through, which it has. Next service is due in a year or 16,000 miles. So we pulled it forward and we're just going to get it ready to go on the ramp. So now we're going to check everything under the bonnet before we go up in the air and drain the oil. On these E-Class, you have got these little linkages here attached to the bonnet. So if you pop this piece out and unhook them on both sides, it allows you to put the bonnet in the service position. And you can open it a lot further. Just gives you a bit more light, makes everything easier to work on. So in the engine bay, we're going to check all the fluid levels, brake fluid, coolant level. We're going to top up the screen wash. We're going to take the engine cover off and we're going to inspect the engine visually for anything that looks out of place, any oil leaks, coolant leaks, all those kind of things. So let's get the cover off. It sits on two little rubber grommets, which as you can see are worn out. It's a very common issue. They just pop out so you can replace them easily. But when they're worn like that, the engine cover will vibrate and it can make the engine sound noisier than it actually is. One good thing to check regularly is the water drains along the scuttle panel. So there's one in either side and then another one in the middle, and they often get blocked up with leaves and mud and just general debris. And when they get blocked up, they can sometimes allow water to go inside the car rather than being able to escape through the water drains, which can cause all kinds of issues. So it's definitely worth checking whilst you're under the engine bay. So this E-Class has a 651 engine, which is 2.1 diesel, which is found in a lot of Mercedes of this era. It's in C-Class, E-Class, S-Class. It's also put in the A, B, CLA and GLA in a transverse location. Common things to look for on these is there's a few different coolant leaks. The water pump leaks, the thermostat housing leak, the coolant housing around the fuel filter leaks. Also a couple of oil leaks, primarily from the rocker cover and the oil cooler, which is down the side, which is part of the oil filter housing. Also this intake pipe, which goes into the airbox, for some reason they like to come loose. So one thing worth checking when you service the car is just give it a pull and see if it comes off, which on this one it is loose. So the Jubilee clip works its way undone and then that boost pipe comes loose, obviously creating an air leak. I've had a quick look around it. The rocker cover is leaking. Easiest way to tell is if you look down in the channel where the injectors sit, there is engine oil filling up the channel, which will then leak out down the back of the engine. So it will require a new rocker cover and a rocker cover gasket. The rocker cover is made of plastic and they are known to warp, so it's not worth the risk of just replacing the gasket. It's a fair amount of work to do, so it makes sense to replace the cover and the gasket. The fuel filter housing, which has coolant in it on this one, is fine. No issues there. I'm just going to take this intake pipe off so that I can inspect the water pump. I've taken the intake pipe off to inspect the water pump, which is a really common failure point on this 651 engine. Relatively straightforward to change, it just bolts to the front. They start to weep, and when they get worse, they start to actually drip coolant out. The bearings become noisy, and if you leave it long enough, it can fail completely So you'll either lose all your coolant or the pump will seize up, which then can damage the bout and cause consequential issues. So it's best to keep an eye on them and get them replaced as soon as they start to weep any coolant. I've brought the car halfway up, so we're going to go around now. We're going to inspect the suspension components that I can see from the outside, which is basically the top of the damper, the spring. These are known to break suspension springs. They corrode and snap. They're all fine on this one. We're also going to inspect the outer sidewall of the tyre. We're going to record the tyre brand, size, and also the date that it was constructed is the 18th week of 2023. So they're still perfectly fine. We're going to measure the brake discs because the brake discs have a minimum thickness. These are slightly lipped, so they may be close to the thickness, and also inspect the brake pads or the outer brake pad, and we'll inspect the inner once it's up in the air. One thing to be aware of on these E-Class, the 211, 212, 207 models, is that the front wheel bearings are tapered wheel bearings. So when you check your wheel side to side and up and down, particularly up and down, you will feel slight play in the wheel. And most people would assume that the wheel bearing is worn and needs replacing, but it's actually just due to the way that they're designed, because they are a tapered bearing, they are adjustable, so there should be very slight play in the wheel bearing. Car's now fully up in the air, so we're going to get the under trays off, get the oil drain in, and then we're going to finish the inspection on the underside of the car. Done a full inspection on the underside of the car. It's generally in good condition. There's just a couple of things to point out. The water pump is leaking. You can see it more from under here. There's coolant on the anti-roll bar. It's also got a large oil leak, which I suspect is mostly from the rocker cover draining down. And the sump plug also has some silicone sealer around it, which is suspicious, and it also looks like it's leaking. So I'm going to have to take the sump plug out and see if the sump is damaged and if it needs to be replaced. So we've got genuine parts and oils for this service. So we're using mercedes-benz 530 229.52 for this engine. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to finish the service on this car today. The sump is actually damaged. There's a very small crack around where the sump plug goes in, which is why somebody's tried to fix it with silicone sealer in the past. It's actually a common issue on these. Being a plastic sump, they do crack. So we're going to have to get a new sump from Mercedes and replace that. But what we would do, if all had gone to plan, at this point is basically replace the oil filter with a genuine paper cartridge, and then refill the oil. These take 6.5 litres of 530 genuine Mercedes oil, and then take the car for a road test and make sure everything's good, and that would be it all done. But we might be able to give you an update once we've got the sump. And I believe the customer also wants to change the rock cover to fix all of the oil leaks. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more videos like this on Mercedes vehicles, then please like, subscribe, and drop a comment below.